Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg. Today, I have a guest whose name I can pronounce. This is a win. Wendy Leggett, and we are going to talk about retirement. And before we jump into it, I just have to think, ask and you shall receive. Like, you know how sometimes you see something or you say something out loud and suddenly you see it in your sponsored ads on Facebook and all that sort of thing, and you're like, Big Brother's watching. I was literally having a conversation with a friend because she was celebrating how much her super had reached. Do you guys call it super? I think you call it 401k. But basically, the money you have aside for your retirement. She'd reached a significant milestone. She sent me a message. She was like, I know that you'll celebrate this with me. And I was like, of course. And then she had some questions about retirement. And I was like, I know nothing about retirement. And the next day, Wendy sends me this message, says, love your show. Haven't heard you talk to anybody about retirement. And I was like, I don't know. It's not like Facebook was watching, but something was. Ask and you shall receive. So where would you like to start this conversation, Wendy?
Yeah, well, I so appreciate the opportunity just to share. And the work that I do, Suzanne, is the non-financial preparation and the focus, those essentials.
Which is just as important.
It is. And yet all of the focus seems to be on financial, which of course is critically important. It's foundational, but we bring our whole selves into retirement. And so oftentimes that gets overlooked. And I think people think, well, how tough can retirement be? Like it's leisure, travel, endless weekends. And yes, it can be that. And it can be that way for people throughout their retirement. But the majority of people are going to run through that honeymoon phase, and then they're going to be feeling like, wow, it's Groundhog's Day, or I've traveled enough, or is this all there is for me? So that's the work that I do.
I think it's also important, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but a lot of people's sense of identity is with their job, with their career. I am a plastic surgeon. I am a gardener. I am a real estate developer. I am a mortgage broker. Whatever, insert thing here. And you've spent however many months, years, decades in this career, an accountant, like so many things. And then you go to retirement. As you said, there is that. I love how you guys say leisure. We say leisure. It's the accent. But
I like yours better. I'll try to adopt that.
You have that time. Well, it's like niche is another word. We say niche like it rhymes with quiche, and you guys say more like niche, depending, which I don't know, as I say, rhymes with bitch, but
yeah. I'm a niche girl myself. So, yeah.
Anyway, like there's that. There's the sense of identity. Also,
Absolutely.
I think relationships, like so say you and your partner, you either both work or one of you is, the homemaker. I don't ever want to use a term that's, but one person does the house duties, one person works outside of the house, however it works. And then you're both together all the time. Like when my husband and I were early together, he actually worked away. So he was away 3 nights out of 4. So he'd go away for 6 nights, he'd be back for 2, or different variations of that. Sometimes he'd go away for a couple of weeks, he'd be back, drive in, drive out. And when he stopped that, we were like, oh, this is going to be great. And I'm not saying it wasn't. Anyone listening, like, but it was bumpy. When your entire relationship is you don't see each other that much. When you do see each other, it's so much more valued. When you see each other all the time, it's kind of like, there's a transition. And that's the thing that you talked about, like the power of transitions. Retirement is a transition. Becoming parents is a transition. Like I think, when you have your children, people are excited and a lot of the focus goes to the baby, but your time of soloness, of being able to just do what you want whenever you want is impinged because you now have somebody to look after all the time. When kids move out, another transition, empty nest. So I love that you're talking not the finance side, because, that is important, but what happens to you as an individual when you retire.
Yes, yeah. And you brought up so many important points, which, yes, I focus on with clients, sense of identity, looking at relationships, the power of transitions. And I really start with people around this idea of how do you define retirement? What does it mean to you? Because retirement carries a lot of baggage from years past. In fact, the word really should be retired because it just doesn't fit in our vocabulary anymore, but it's a shared language. And I say that because it was really developed at that time when Social Security came about because people needed that safety net. They were working in the fields, they were working in the factories, they were tired. And so they came to this point where then they needed to leave their work. And so then the government stepped in, at least in the States, and then had Social Security for them. And so, and yet we're, years and years, decades and decades past all of that. And yet we still pull back to that tradition of when you're 62 or 65 or whatever, that people think, oh, I should retire. And we know that when we hear that word should, that's external to us. We're listening to other voices. And so I had a client I wanted to share that came to me wanting to work through planning for her retirement a couple years in advance. And when I started to ask her about, well, what does retirement mean to you? And what are you retiring to? And what are you retiring with? She really came to the, surfacing the situation that she wasn't retiring on her own terms. It was because all of her family was putting so much pressure on her. They had all retired early, and then they kept saying, you need to come join us. It's so wonderful in the water over here. And so, but again, in talking with her, she was so gratified with the work that she was doing. She felt that she had balance. She was seeing family members as much as she wanted to, and all of that. And so, yeah, so it's really important, and I don't have too many clients like that, but at the same time, why now? What is it that about retirement that's so important to you? And you brought up this idea too about sense of identity. And there's that saying, if you are what you do, who are you when you don't? And that rings so true because our work can become so intertwined with our lives that when we leave the work behind, we can leave pieces of ourselves behind. So it's a really important exploration and time for reflection. So that then leads us, and I'm kind of chattering on, but that leads us to this idea of transitions. And you're probably aware of the work that William Bridges does around a transition, that it starts with the ending. And it starts with really recognizing, okay, what am I ending here with a period or an exclamation mark? What do I need to leave behind? And then going into what he calls the neutral zone. It's also called the messy middle, this time of confusion, this time of uncertainty. A lot of my clients come to me saying they feel lost or they feel like they're going to fail at retirement. So having a chance to surface those emotions, you and I talked about toxic positivity and pushing down some of those feelings or pushing them aside. But it's a really important time to dig deep and give ourselves that space and grace. To figure out, what does this next chapter look like for me? What does it open up for me? And what do I not want to bring into it with me before we embark on that new beginning? So you hit upon some really important points there, the sense of identity, the transition, and just really recognizing what are we retiring to.
I love the fact that you brought up sometimes a sense of arbitrary nature, like at the age. So here in Australia, the retirement age used to be 65, but depending on the year you were born, they keep changing it. So I don't know, but I think my official retirement age for when I'm born is going to be sometime in my 70s now, because they keep pushing it back. So that's when officially you could get some government assistance. So here in Australia, they call it the aged pension. But some people, if you're self-funded retiree, you could retire at any age because then you're managing the funds that you've put aside. So,
yes.
But I love how you brought the point. What is it that's triggering this transition for you? Is it the clock's turned over? Because it's like another thing that always gets me is New Year's resolutions. Like it's literally a calendar flip. It's a change of the thing. And I'm not saying that if you feel some sort of momentum in a new season or a new year or a new week, like you do you, make that your thing. But sometimes people will put off something or ignore something or go, oh, I can't do it yet because it's not January 1st or a Monday, the universal day to change your life. So it's like you're looking at with people, what is they're retiring from? What is it they're retiring to? Because as you said, the people might be all like, yeah, come here, the water's great. And you're like, actually, I'm hydrophobic. I don't want to get in the water. Like, I don't necessarily want to spend more time with family. Some people might be, that's lights them up. That's what they're so excited for. They've been looking forward to. Because it's funny too, even about like transitioning the family home. I've never been opposed to moving to I don't know what they call them, but like the retirement village or whatever. Like I'm like, if I don't have to mow my lawn and I can like play darts and bingo, like my question is, do we both have to be above the age or just my husband? Because he's quite a bit older than me, but like that's never been for me. But other people will be like, no, I don't want to lose my independence. I always want to have my own space and whatever. but
Yeah.
it's an individual thing. But also
Yes.
too, and you're in a partnership, I'm fortunate that my husband kind of feels the same. If we can move to one of these villages and we don't have to mow the grass and, you know, whatever, like, let's do that. But sometimes you have one party that is fiercely independent and not wanting to, and then the other party. So how do you help people in that kind of situation?
Yes, thank you. Because I was thinking back, you had brought up another point and you spoke about relationships. And I want to really spotlight this idea that I speak to, which is a retirement by design, not default. So that we're really being mindful about what it is that we want to do and we're keying in on what's important to us before we just embark on somebody else's life. Because retirement is such a unique and potentially really exciting chapter. You know, when we think about when we're young, then we're in school, and then we're working, and we're striving, and we're striving, and we're striving. And now we have a chance to really be the CEO of our own lives. We get to call the shots if we step into it and we take that ownership and we take that accountability. But oftentimes people abdicate those decisions. So I feel very strongly about a retirement by design, not default. And so springboarding off of that into the relationship piece, it is that ownership of what do I envision in this next chapter, and getting clear on that, and then sharing that with your significant other and having them share their vision, and then seeing, okay, where do you come together? Where do you have some friction points? What do you need to work on together? And then what path do you want to take together, and what individually would you like to do? And you bring those experiences back to the relationship. But I do work with couples on this, and I think what is important for us to know too is studies tell us that men and women come into retirement with very different mindsets. Now, these are generalities driven by studies, but in the main, men come in with that idea of rest and relaxation, and women come in with the idea of rejuvenation and reimagining. And so we see already there's a gap here. And I love the gaps, because the tension in the gaps gives us some clues as to what really needs our focus. But at the same time, if it doesn't get our focus and communication, then we can go off in very different directions. And there is this concept of graying divorces. And it really is on the rise, because people then move into this next chapter and they start to see a big disconnect. One of my clients who retired, her husband had already retired. She came into retirement a couple of years later. She just kind of brought on that whole busyness factor and that, you know, high productivity from her work, which had been a very high powered job. And she started managing her husband. And so that's, you know, a non-starter. And so those are the kinds of things we want to go in with our eyes wide open. I do talk about this idea of a realistic optimism. You know, I brought up this idea that we can be so idealistic and we can come in with this leisure travel, rose-colored glasses, or on the other end of the spectrum, we can come in with this, you know, feelings about loss and aging and one foot into the grave. And I love the idea of not being black or white, but, you know, yes, and bringing it into the middle and see what's possible. And we can do that by understanding what we're stepping into, that's the reality, and then the optimism, because we're mapping out what's important to us.
I love that term. I don't think I've ever heard it before, realistic optimism, because I think sometimes, yeah, you have the rose-colored glasses, or like, once I retire, everything's going to be amazing. I'm just going to travel. I'm going to read books all day. And then how long can you do that for before you get bored? And the point of, you know, communication. So my husband and I have talked about retirement for a long time, and we're nowhere near the age that we want to do it. But our plan, what we'd love to do, is to retire to a cruise ship. We love cruising. We've done 12 of them, but we're also realistic optimism. How long could we do this before we get bored?
Mm.
So perhaps instead of selling everything and like buying a cabin or whatever, or a space that you continually book, it's like we put it in storage. We give ourselves 3 months or 6 months. We do the world cruise or something like that. And then we reevaluate, because I think sometimes something sounds amazing, and not just retirement, but anything in life. You can be like, I'm going to become an author. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to get fit, whatever. Because you see people
Yes.
who do it, and you don't see the realistic optimism. Like the Olympics was on recently. You see the gold medals. You see the best of the best. You don't
Yes.
see the hours and the slog and the stuff that goes in behind the scenes. So when you're actually realistically experiencing this thing, it might not be that great. Like, we
Yeah.
love cruising, and the longest cruise we've ever done is like 17 days. We might find back-to-back cruising boring, or we might love it and go, this is the life, like never having to cook our food or wash stuff. Like we might be like, we are
Yeah.
sold, but you
Well,
don't
or you
know.
might be the note coach on that cruise and you can be
Oh,
part of the
it's
lineup.
funny you said that so much, because we cruised earlier this year for my 40th birthday. We hadn't really cruised because COVID took a few years out. But the way the internet has gotten so much better, like we could stream Netflix in the middle of the ocean between Australia and New Zealand. I was like, maybe we don't need to wait till we retire. Maybe we just need to wait till the kids are out of the house and then I can work from a cruise ship for my own business. Like that would, I don't know, we'll test it. But
I
his
don't,
job is more a in-person one. So
not sure if everybody's getting to watch you, but your face really lit up on that one. So you need to put that on what I call the curious list. It doesn't have to be on the bucket list, but on the curious list. And to that point, is taking that experimental approach rather than jumping in with both feet, because so often people do. They make these commitments, they get out of their career, move out of their career, and then they go full on into full-time volunteer position, or full on to taking care of grandchildren, or full on to some other commitment. And then they start to feel, that's why we saw people unretire, because they started feeling like, wow, if I'm going to do this much, I might as well get paid for it. Or, yeah, so it's, instead we have this opportunity to experiment and take it one step at a time and test the waters and see if it feels good. And so I love that you're already thinking about that. And I think that's why no matter what age or life stage, I think what I share is an important message, because ultimately the vast majority of us are going to retire at some point in time. And so by recognizing that it doesn't just happen, that we design it, or if it does just happen, it may not really live up to our expectations or our potential.
yes.
We have purpose built into our work. And so again, when we leave the work behind, we can leave feeling purposeful behind. And so what does that look like for us? But that word looms so large, you have to find your purpose. And it's like this holy grail out there. And that's something I wanted to spell too, because purpose can be with a capital P, it can be with a small p. It can change all the time. So instead of finding purpose, let's feel purposeful. And each day, what feels purposeful to us. And it may be reading a book, and it may be taking a class, and it may be taking care of that grandchild, and it may be a part-time job or starting a business or volunteering. But let's feel purposeful, so that we do, as human beings, we need to feel like we matter. It's important. Like, why am I here? And so that's a really pivotal point for people to uncover, is what feels good to them.
I think that's such a great frame, purpose with a big capital P versus a small p, but feeling purposeful in each day. Because as you said, that some people's obsession with the hunt for purpose can feel like looking for the Holy Grail, or can look like it feels pressuring. And it feels like, if I don't, have you ever watched Encanto? It's a kids
Yeah.
movie. For anyone listening, there's Encanto, and basically there's a magical family, and when they come of age, their magic comes to them, and they each have, a gift. And one of them, there's this song called Pressure. I think it's called Surface Pressure. Don't worry, I won't ruin everyone's ears. Today I'm not in a singing mood. Then in my head, I'm singing the song.
I
But,
heard you sing. I heard you sing on one of your podcasts, and you're going to deny us?
I don't know if I can carry this tune. But anyway, she talks about like, I'm the strong one, and like, the pressure that she feels. And I think, sometimes finding purpose can feel so much full of pressure. Or if you do the thing, say you're like, I've done it. I've written the book. Like I'm a coach, the Nope coach. Those who listen to the show, that there's not a lot of frame of reference in people's minds who aren't familiar with the coaching industry. So I remember my parents, they never really got it. And my late mother was like, yeah, I don't know what my daughter does. But when I wrote my book, she's an author. Like, she could get behind that, And back to your talk about who are you without your title. It's never really bothered me not having an official title, because I whatever I do today feels like this is the right thing for now. It leads to your purpose in this day, as opposed to some people who like really get a lot of their push or drive or sense of achievement from, I'm a PhD, or I'm this, or I'm that. I had a point to this. Oh yeah, back to the Encanto and whatever. There's one person in the family, when the time comes, like the magic's coming in and they have the ceremony and everyone's gathered, nothing happens. Like nothing. I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't watched it, so I really encourage you to watch this movie. But what everybody in the family makes it mean that this person doesn't have a gift, doesn't have magic, or in this case, doesn't have a purpose. And it's
Yes.
like, it's fascinating in life how, and from my opinion, watching the movie, she ends up being the happiest of the characters because she's not tied to, I'm the strong one, or I'm the one who has amazing hearing, or I'm the one who, because she can just
Yes.
be her. And to your point of having a purpose in the day, some days my purpose is helping my kids with their homework. And some days my purpose is do your own thing because I want to read a book.
Yes, yeah, but that idea of putting us in a box, and I think that's where also I want to really help people uncover this idea that as they age, that they're in this box of being elderly, or they're being a senior, or they're old. And that doesn't have to be a box that we put ourselves in. If we're allowing others to put us in there, that's on us. But we don't have to be there. And I've had clients say, oh, I feel invisible, or I am invisible. And it's like, well, what's allowing you to feel that way? Because if you're getting those messages from others, but you're receiving it and you're responding to it, you have a choice. Are you invisible? And so I think it's really important that we not put ourselves in these boxes. And like we said, you're mentioning maybe 70 is going to be the typical age for retirement, and it's going up in the United States as well, so far as Social Security. But why put ourselves in that box? There are people that are retiring in their 30s, and there are people that I did a presentation. The gentleman came up to me afterwards and he said, I definitely want to work with you when I retire, but I'm not ready yet. And he was 92 and owned a
I
business.
love that. And
I
that's
loved
such a
it
good
too.
point too. Like if you're looking at retirement separate from your age, separate from the society telling you, separate from, what benefits you can or can't get. So I can't remember if I've shared this on the podcast before, but I am nothing if not fully honest. I got to own my ageism. So I went to the States in July, realized I was incredibly unfit. Going to the States in the hottest time of the year, going through Death Valley. Oh, story for another day. Anyway, I was like, I need to get fit again. So I came home, started doing water aerobics because I've always liked that. Don't feel any issues with my joints in the water. Don't mind that I'm the youngest person by several decades. It's just amazing. Anyway, going to these classes, this is like my fourth or fifth class, waiting for the instructor. We're all in the water, chatting away, whatever. And this elderly lady comes along and is like, everybody run up the other end of the pool. And I thought, oh, she must be getting ready to get in the water. She's having a bit of a land. That's something my late mother would have done, like, pretended to take over the class. And it wasn't until like 3 minutes in that I realized she wasn't having a land. This was the instructor. And I was like, oh my goodness, talk about ageism, because this lady would be at least 80 in the shade. And it was the best class ever. And I go to her class every week now, bar none. I've said to her last week, you're my favorite instructor. Gosh, she worked as hard. Because in the back of my mind, I was like, this little old lady, she's going to be so nice and kind. It's going to be easy. It's not easy. Of all the classes I go to, she's the toughest.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have music. She doesn't do it like everyone else. She doesn't use the mic. And I think sometimes in anything in life, we're like, I can't do it this way because this is how you do it. Like if you do a podcast, you have to have an intro and an outro and you have to edit. No, you don't. You can just hit record. That's what I do. But, some of the instructors, like, I can't teach aerobics in my 80s. Why not? Says
Yes.
who? Like, do you want to retire? Do you want to keep going? And it's up to the people who are attending the class to get value from it. And if they
Yes.
don't need to attend. They can find another class. And I think so often we try and be this chameleon and change ourselves to fit everyone. And then that's exhausting. And instead,
Yeah.
it's like, actually, what do I want? As you said, what am I going to retire from? What am I going to retire to? And do I even want to? Like, I'm sure this lady will teach until the end and she'll be just as good.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think we can put, we have limiting beliefs. We can put these boundaries around ourselves, but we're buying into them. And so that's where this opportunity to really reflect on what's important to me. What do I want to bring with me into retirement? And maybe equally as important, what am I going to leave behind? And hopefully shedding some of that those anti-aging messages that we have, or shedding some of those patterns or habits that we've been shackled to, because we have this. It's not a totally new book, but it's a new chapter, and so we can bring things with us, but we're not starting over, but we can definitely start fresh. And so I think that that's vitally important as well. Speaking of starting fresh, and it came to my mind when you brought up relationships, the idea too that when we leave our work, we leave a lot of those relationships behind. We know that our days in the workplace bring with them all this connection. And so when we step out of it, and a lot of people think they'll bring those friendships or relationships with them, but when we don't have that common goal that we're all, striving toward, a lot of those relationships don't really last. And so it's important. And again, before we retire, if possible, to start thinking about, okay, who are my friends outside of work? And is there a range of them? Are they all my same demographic, or are there different ages and things? And it's never too late to build new friendships. It's never too late to resurrect old friendships. I had one client who said, gosh, I've been so committed to my work. I left a lot of friendships behind and now it's too late. And I really challenged her to say, well, what's too late? If one of those people you've not been in contact with contacted you, how would you feel? She said, oh, I would love that. I said, well, how about if you're that person? I invite you to reach out. And she did. And it was so gratifying. Everybody was really happy to hear from her. And she was able to then build upon several of those relationships going forward. So
That
really,
is
really an
such an
important
amazing
piece.
point, because there are times, seasons in your life where friendships can tend to be easier. Like, you look at kids. I take my son to the park. After 5 minutes, he knows everyone's name and where they live and what school they go to and like every single thing about them. It's incredible. But as an
Yeah.
adult, you kind of feel a bit awkward, in a way, but you can overcome that. But as you said, when you leave, when you retire from a workplace, or you just move, like my husband and I have moved a lot. And
Mm.
it's funny because we're kind of used to moving now. The last time we did a big move, the people, I love them dearly. They put on a farewell. I wasn't even going to bother. They put on a farewell party and whatever. I'm like, we're kind of used to this. And people are like, oh, we'll keep in contact. And sometimes you do. But a lot of the time, as you said, when your circumstance change, you don't see them every day or several times a week. You're not in the same kind of circle with your decision. I'm sure this is what you work with people with too, but defining what you want to take with you. If you do, it's actually, I really want to stay connected with this person. Well, what are some things that you can put in place to reach out, to connect? What are some things you have outside of work? Or how can you fulfill and find new people? Because I love the people at water aerobics. Like they're like, hi, Suzanne. Someone called me a regular. I was like, oh my gosh, they know my name. Because I have a podcast, but people who meet me in person, I tell you guys, I'm socially awkward and I always have my earbuds in. So I forget that, people do kind of know you. First time someone knew me from my show, I nearly died. I was like, oh my gosh. But,
You're a celebrity.
I was like, I'm famous.
Yeah.
Anyway, but all that to say, sometimes I think people take it as a personal affront. You move or you retire or you leave. It's like nobody likes me anymore or whatever. It's not, it's nothing personal, because you just out of sight, out of mind. As horrible as that saying is, sometimes that can be true. It can work for, like, if you open the pantry and the chocolate bar's right there, every time you open the pantry, oh, I feel like chocolate. But if I put it at the back and hide it in a dark container, don't see it, I can go to the pantry and not think about it. But, if you don't see the people all the time, and your point too, how would you feel if they reached out to you? I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's Wendy. Yay. Like, it's even things like podcasting and stuff. Sometimes people message me and they're like, do you remember? Of course I remember you. But, it's like they feel awkward. But
Yeah.
making friends as an adult is different, but also only if you see it that way. Like, as I said, my son is like, who am I going to meet today? And he's so excited. And I was like, why can't we be that as an adult? Like, I've talked to people in the supermarket who I've seen like holding a book in the checkout, and I'm like, oh, I've read that one, it's so good. And we've just made this conversation and got chatting over a book. Like, it can be the
Yes.
weirdest thing that you have in common. But when you do transition away from things, workplace, house, the kids, like when my kids were in kindergarten, it was so much easier to make friends than when my kids are at higher grades. You don't tend to talk so much. And now my daughter's transitioning to high school next year. I'm like, I wonder if we kind of, do you do the mum? I don't know. I guess we'll see. But like, it might be handy to have other mum friends, because then you can organize drop up and pick up and after school activities and all this sort of stuff. But sometimes the reason that you're in that person's life does change or shift as you do, but that doesn't mean they don't like you as a person. You've just kind of not seen them or come to mind as much.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's important to look at each relationship and really determine, was it a season, like you said, or was there a reason, or is it a friendship of a lifetime? But really being aware of it and really thoughtful about it, because oftentimes we have people in our lives, I talk about them as, energizers or drains. And so really thinking about who really is in your corner, who's part of your tribe, who helps boost you, not to say that they have to agree with you, but they support you, as opposed to people who really pull you down. And so when we move into retirement, we want to build that circle of people that we feel we really connect with and that are on our side, and that aren't drains. And so being mindful about that, and that's an exercise I go through with my clients so that they can really start to see, sometimes we take our friends for granted, or sometimes people are the ones that do all the initiating. And so really kind of flipping that script and taking some responsibility around that as well. But I agree with you. I have 3 adult sons, but as they were growing up, that was like a baked in social circle. And so there were just so many things that we did with families, and I did with moms, and we did with their kids and things. At the same time, what an incredible opportunity for you to get to pick and choose, because who your kids go to school with, that circle may or may not be one that you would have, really on your own developed. Not to say that it's not still wonderful, but now you have that autonomy and that choice, and being that CEO of you, that you have to take those steps. And again, if it's just one step at a time, it doesn't have to be, oh, I have to have this huge social circle, or I'm an outcast, or no.
Yes, it's not a dichotomy like that. I think sometimes we put a false dichotomy in our head. It's this or this, but I loved your distinction of energy. I think you said energizers versus drains. I would say energy vampires, but I think drains is slightly nicer. But everybody, I'm sure there's that person you can kind of go into a room and you're feeling ambivalent, like you're not this, but you're not that. And then after you have a talk to them, like the Eeyore friend, oh dear. And you're like, oh no, whereas there'd be other people where you're kind of feeling that both ambivalent. And then afterwards you're like, okay, I'm ready to take on the world. I'm going to go do my tax or do whatever the thing is that you've been avoiding because you feel so energized after
Yeah,
spending time with them. And I think, as you said, having that autonomy, being the CEO of you don't go tell the people, I can't hang out with you, you're a drain. Like, no, but you
no,
get to decide. And I think, taking this, into people pleasing and the work that I do with people, sometimes, that decision, it seems clear cut, it seems easy, but you can feel kind of the pull or the thread too to check in to see if they're okay, whatever. And it's like, yeah, but do I have the capacity to hold space for this? Do I want to do this? And sometimes it's a no. And it's kind of like maybe this is a sign that that I start to distance myself from rather than get all up in the gill of what they have going on. Like I love the friend who messaged me just before this show asking about retirement because she'd reached a significant number. She's like, I reached out to you because I know you would celebrate it with me. I love people, I like to celebrate the smallest things. Your kids slept through the night, I'm your person. You finally toilet trained them, I'm your person. Like you said no to your boss when they ask you to do something for 5 minutes, which you knew would take 2 hours. Like I can celebrate anything. Whereas other people only celebrate like the huge things, like I bought a house or, I make the New York Times bestseller list. These are important things too, but it's like, if you can celebrate, I think it leads back to your point on purpose. Instead
yeah.
of like the culmination of my life is to be an Olympian, it's like I got in the pool when I didn't want to. Like you can have those moments daily rather than just this once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that, I always try to think of a different wording, because I think, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I would prefer to think of some other wording for it, but the concept I think is so critically important, and that's what you're getting at, is that along the way, let's be present. Let's really be in the moment, not looking in the rear view mirror, but that windshield, and what's ahead of us and what's right here in front of us. And really savoring that, because as we move into retirement, there is this time abundance, and we can feel as though, oh, okay, studies say that I'll have 20 or 30 years more in my life, but yet we don't get to choose. All we get to choose is making the most of this present moment. And so I really speak with my clients about that, as well as prioritizing and really thinking, if there was limits around the time and you didn't have that time abundance, what would be the priorities? What would be the things that you wanted to make sure you didn't have any regrets around? Because you can reverse engineer and you can think about, what I'm going to leave behind, but what I would want to leave behind that I can do now. And so I think
Yes.
that that's just a very powerful and important message as well.
But I
You
think,
mentioned too about like a pleaser, and that's work that I present to my clients too, is this idea of mental fitness. We work out and we build our muscles from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, really building those muscles around having a positive perspective. And if there are these, what the terminology saboteurs, a pleaser saboteur and an avoider saboteur, a hyperachiever saboteur, that happens often for people post-career, really not letting them hijack you, not letting them to pull you down because of those difficult emotions, but recognizing them and really reflecting on, okay, what's coming up for me, and then moving into a positive state once we've looked at those emotions and recognize, what's coming up for us that needs some addressing. So is that you're shaking, you're
yeah, no,
agreeing
I'm
with
thinking
that?
high achiever saboteur too, because, and also the time abundance is coming to mind, because when you are a high achiever or when you're doing the things, you don't really often, or maybe this is just me, generalization, make the time to savor it and to enjoy it. Because if you're anything like me, you're already on to the next thing. It's like, I now I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to do this. And then as you retire and you said you have the time abundance, I think some people can fall more into the nostalgia
Mm,
rather than actually enjoying that time abundance. Another movie reference, you may not have seen this one. Have you seen either of the Inside Out movies?
no.
Once again, kids' movies, but I think you get so much value and lessons from kids' movies.
No, when my grandkids are a little older and they get to go to movies, I can't wait, because we used to be up on all the movies. So
But in
yeah,
Inside Out 2, they have the teenage emotions coming
the
in. So, like
emotion.
anxiety and
Yeah.
boredom and all this sort of stuff. But one of them that keeps coming out through the movie is nostalgia. And it's like a little granny with a little walking stick. And they're like, it's not time for you yet. Go away. Sending her back into the cupboard. But the reason that's coming to mind is sometimes I think when you have the time abundance, instead of actually enjoying it like you had hoped, it's kind of like, oh, well, I'm not publishing papers, or I'm not getting the latest awards or the latest achievements. But instead, it's like making the time to enjoy them as you do it, yes, but also like this is what it was leading for. This was the culminating moment. This is, because I think the imposter syndrome or the people pleasing or the saboteurs, all this, like when you pause, and retirement, as you said, the great pause, or can be, all this stuff catches up. I think a lot of people can descend rapidly into this nostalgia kind of not nice place, instead of like, God, I lived a great life, like this excitement of all the things and what else is yet to come.
And what else
um
is possible? Yeah, and I
yeah.
think I think that the demographic that's in retirement now, the baby boomer generation and Gen X coming up as well, weren't raised with positive psychology, weren't raised with this idea that emotions are signals. They don't need to be pushed away or pushed down. But in times past, it was a matter of, they're not efficient, they're not productive, so no pain, no gain, and just power through. And we've learned that those are signals. And so that's something that I work on with my clients as well, is, what is your perspective? Is the glass half empty? Is it half full? What's needed to be able to have that abundance? What's getting in the way? And not overlooking it, but really, bringing it to the surface, doing some excavation around that, because that is vitally important. And I think, too, what came to my mind when you were talking about the time abundance is that chocolate that you said was going to be dark in the dark back of the pantry, but you bring that box out, and if it's a full box of chocolates, are you going to appreciate it as much as that one single piece of chocolate? And
Yes.
so I think that that's part of it too, is that we just feel like, oh, we have all the time in the world, and so we don't look at that time. I talk about filling time versus fulfilling time, and it's important.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do like that, because yeah,
yeah.
filling time is in, like, when my mum My mum passed away last year, and when I went to visit her in the month leading up, she was in the hospice for a while. And a hospice is a place where you go to transition to your end of life.
Yeah.
And what I really admired about the place that she was in was that, you know, the fulfilling time, or as much as they tried to have the fulfilling nature, like they'd bring in musicians and things that they would do. So it wasn't just you were filling time, like waiting to die. Like it was, this time was still meaningful. And the encouragement we had to like take her out to a coffee shop if she's able that day, and would also be day-to-day dependent, but rather than just like ticking over, because I think sometimes it's like, you know, you can be in transition in any point of your life. Doesn't necessarily be retirement. Like some people I talk to waiting until their kids go to school, or waiting until their kids move out of home. Like if you're looking for a reason to wait, you're always going to find one. But if you find the fulfilling time in each moment,
Yes.
then that can be so much more powerful indeed.
Yes. Yeah. No. And thank you for sharing about your mom. And, you know, I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm glad to hear that there was that love and that support and that really caring um,
As a
environment.
result of that, my niece, who is a nurse, actually transitioned now to work as a hospice nurse, because she was like,
Mm.
the experience we had as a family. And I think, you know, there can be jobs that must be heart-wrenching, like, you know, cancer doctors, nurses, support people, so any sort of support people. But if you find the richness in each individual person, not just their diagnosis or their label, and I
Yeah.
think, you know, with many parts of our life, it's like, this is, you know, is this the time ticking point? Or is this, what can I do right now? And that doesn't mean you need to be outwardly like, you know, you could be, what I'm choosing to do right now is listen to this podcast because, you know, that's what you're doing, or go for a walk, or read a book, or call a friend, or whatever. But instead
Yeah.
of, as you said, just filling time, just ticking it away. And I think, you know, that's something really powerful indeed. One thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up, so almost at time. Have you watched Ted Lasso? Now, that's not a kid's
Yes.
show.
Yay. I have.
You know how, I think it's season one, they say to, like, would you rather be, is it a panda or a lion? And
Oh,
and Jamie Tart's like, why would I want to be anything other than me? And it was like, that's actually such a healthy point of view. But it's kind of like, you know, with the finding the purpose, it's like, you know, what, you already have it today, right now, in this moment. And it's like, it doesn't mean that you can't strive for something else, or want to create something else, or desire something else, but also
yeah.
looking at what's already awesome about you. Even the littlest things, like on my hardest days, I can be like, oh, what I really like to say, I love that I had a really hot shower. Like there's been times where the plumbing didn't work, or I love that I have a car that functions. I love personally, and I admire this every day, how close everything is to where we live right now. Like I grew up in the country on a farm, and when we moved to the city, I remember everyone in my family's like, you're gonna hate it there. It's so noisy, it's so crowded, there's so much pollution. And I'm like, I love that I can start making dinner, realize the capsicum's rotten, turn off the stove, walk across the fruit bar, come back, and it's only 10 minutes. Like this is incredible. But you
Yeah.
know, it's like, why would I want anything else rather than what I have now?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're really underscoring that gratitude, which we didn't touch upon, but you're really giving that message to all of us, you know, that we live with gratitude if we're present and if we're aware. And also, you mentioned earlier those celebrations along the way, really recognizing the small things, even if it's quote unquote a failure, celebrating the learning, you know, celebrating the opportunities. And so I think if we come into retirement with that realistic optimism, so we're blending the hope with the reality, and we're making things happen that we're mapping out for ourselves, and we're stepping into it fully, you know, how can it be anything but wonderful?
Oh, I
And
love that. What a nice
opportunity.
way to end. So, Wendy, let the listeners know what it is that you do and how they can find you. And I know that you have a roadmap to retirement, like a mini workbook. Tell them all about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So the name of my company is Conflux Retirement Coaching, and that's spelled CONFLUX. So you can look at my website, confluxretirementcoaching.com, and you'll see I offer a lot of different offerings for individuals, for couples, for groups. And what I do is really help people transition into retirement. But you heard me share that story earlier. I don't advocate for retirement. You know, I just say, if you're choosing to retire, then I want you to retire well. I want it to be fulfilling for you. And I'm a person that can help you then through that transition, helping you with that readiness, helping you with that roadmap. helping you if you're already in retirement, shift the narrative and make it what you want it to be. And so you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Wendy Leggett. And yeah, this little retirement mini workbook, I love the idea of people taking what we've learned today and really writing it out. You know, we know that when we write things out, that it oftentimes helps crystallize or cement some of our thoughts. So the mini workbook does have a variety of different exercises you can go through. And then along with that, I do offer a complimentary discovery session, and I'm happy to talk about your answers to the questions or anything that's coming up for your listeners as they think about retirement or they're experiencing retirement. So
I love that. And I really encourage everyone to take you up on that, because I think sometimes, if you book a discovery session, for me, it's that accountability to finish the workbook. So if you download it and then book it, it's like, well, then I'm actually going to have to make time to go through it because I'm going to be chatting to Wendy about it. So really would encourage people to do that and to think about it, as you said, not necessarily tied to an age, but a stage or the feeling or how you can best prepare for that. And that preparation can begin at any time. So thank you so much, Wendy. This has been really, really enjoyable and eye-opening.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everyone, for joining us. Hope to catch you on the next one. Bye for now.